Programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, are you ready for the storm season? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Today is actually the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money, and Tony Joe's with me as he is every Friday to take your Car Corner question. The number to call is 1-877-913-5357. Do have a line open, and if you got a question, just give us a call. 1-877-913-5357 is the number to call. I had to turn around and make sure I had a line open. I'm saying I do, and I may not. But we do have a line open, so give us a call if you got a question for Tony Joe. Tony Joe, you know, I always fascinated by my kids, what comes out of their mouth.
Welcome to the party.
Oh, hang on. Let me turn you. There we go.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, I got one who's 21. I got one who's 18. And so my 18, especially my 21-year-old, I'm always fascinated how he thinks. So, at any rate, he sends me a text and says, "Hey, did you see that Mazda is going to make my car? They're going to make one into an electric vehicle." And I said, just out of curiosity, what would motivate you to buy an electric vehicle? He went down the list. He said, cheaper than gas, less maintenance, more power, silent driving, big write-off on taxes, better for the economy. Now that sounds on paper like the most the best choice out of all the boxes you could check to get an electric vehicle. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't want to belabor the point, and I'm very proud of your son, Blaine. Do we say that?
Yeah, sure,
okay.
It's fine.
Anyway, he's a good kid, and there's a lot to be proud of. But he's young, and I would just say this, Bob. If you want to go through the list, I'll be glad to. But let's just take the first one. What was the first one?
Cheaper than gas.
Cheaper than gas. Well, here's what I would say to my kids if they were still living at home, young, like Blaine. I would say, okay, Blaine, cheaper than gas, that might be. But how much is it going to cost you in electricity? How much is a kilowatt hour? You don't know. You don't pay the electric bill. So let's find out if it's really, truly going to be cheaper than gas. Because, Bob, I will tell you this. I know it sounds like it's just my opinion, of course. This is just my opinion, but I see them trying to, I know they say they're not going to, but they are. They're going to get rid of gas stoves. They're going to get rid of, seems like they're driving the economy towards everything electric, which we don't have a grid to support. We've talked about that many times, and when they don't have a grid to support, the government's going to have to step in and upgrade things, and it's going to end up being a government-controlled electric company. I can already see it coming. And then the price is going to depend on the infrastructure and the amount of debt to build all this stuff. And you know the kilowatt hour is going to go through the roof. Now, having said that, I'm not saying it's going to be cheaper than gas until we see what happens with how much electricity they're going to charge you for a kilowatt hour and how much it's going to cost you to charge your car, how much it's going to cost you to actually drive that car. Will it be cheaper? I don't know. I doubt it, but that's just one thing. And I will say this before I stop on my rant. It has been introduced this week into legislation in California. I don't know if you know about this.
Didn't know.
They are going to now attempt, if they can pass this bill, they're going to attempt to charge your electric rate according to your income level. People that make more pay more per kilowatt hour. People that make less pay less per kilowatt hour. Spread the wealth, Bob. That's one way to do it, and that's fact. They're introducing that this week. I just heard it this week.
Even for California, that's a little bit of a stretch, even for California.
Well, Bob, you know what? I agree with you, and I would think it absurd as anybody else, except look at what's already going on, and you would think that was absurd, but yet it's not. So it's interesting to watch. So cheaper than gas is not necessarily something that you can say that now, but let's see what happens.
You asked, this was kind of interesting. You asked Alyssa, who works in my office. You asked her would she ever buy an electric car, and she said no, because they don't have chargers at the apartments where we live.
Right. You know
and
what?
You didn't even think about that.
I never thought about that. And all the time we've been discussing and evaluating pros and cons of electric cars, there's something that I never realized, and I hope anybody that's listening, if they ever thought about this, I'm sure they did if they live in an apartment, but when I think of owning an electric car, I own a home. So I think, okay, I got to have I wouldn't buy one, but if I did, I would have to have a charger put in my garage, and that's going to cost, by the way, tell Blaine that costs money too. So green across the palm there, buddy. Anyway, you're going to have one put in your home, and obviously you're going to have to pay for the machine, and you're going to have to pay to have it installed, and you're going to have to pay the electricity to charge your car. But what do you do if you live in an apartment? That never crossed my mind.
Well, think about the number of people who live in an apartment and the number of potential electric cars in one, maybe two stations.
Well, let's say there's even a lot of stations. You got to realize that, there's a condensed area with a big population. That's an apartment complex, right? Yeah, a lot of people, small location. So they're going to put chargers in, of course, probably. So every time you go to charge up your car, that charger, somebody paid for it, the battery charging station. Somebody paid for it. Somebody's got to buy electricity for it. And you got to realize that they're not going to sell you electricity for the same kilowatt hour rate you're getting at your apartment. Somebody's got to make money, or it doesn't exist. So that's another thing about driving an electric car in the future. How much is it going to cost you when you live in Texas and you're on a trip to see Grandma in North Carolina and you stop in Georgia to charge up? See, these are all things that I wonder about because we don't know.
Right. We were once a year we bring up and talk about what to do in the event that you get caught in a weather situation. And what I said earlier when we introduced the program was that, are you ready for the storm season? And I'm sure people go, it's already almost May 1st. But, I can't remember the statistic. I do remember them saying this, that it's April and May that are the most tornadoes, most storms of any other time of the year.
We can have a tornado any month of the year, but March, April, and May are the three most, statistically, the most active months for tornadoes, what we call tornado season. June 1st starts hurricane season. So right now we're in a pretty active period, and most of us know that, but it's always good to talk about in case you're a young person and don't know exactly what to do. It's always good to talk about what to do in certain situations when bad weather arrives and you're out on the road.
I'll never forget this conversation I had with a DPS trooper. I was putting gas in the car, and the toll road was right there, and it was Christmas Eve day. There's water all over the roads. Ice was forming, and I said, I made some comment to the trooper. I said, because he was right there, and I said, boy, people are driving really fast. And he said, this always stuck with me. He said, the thing that people don't understand is that the speed limit is for normal driving times. If it's not normal driving condition, then you need to be driving slower than the speed limit, or you'll have a problem. And I don't think a lot of people know that.
No, 75 miles an hour on the highway, when it's posted 75, means the roads are dry, conditions are good, visibility's good. There's no, active weather. That's under the best conditions possible. So anything less than the best conditions possible, like a storm, a thunderstorm, flooding events, hard rain, visibility's low, fog, those kind of things, 2 words: slow down.
Yeah, let me ask you this though. So let's say that you're going speed limit or greater on the highway. What could actually happen because you were going that fast besides somebody pulling into your lane and you couldn't stop quick enough because you couldn't get any traction? But I mean, you can't go into a hydroplane like that, can you?
You mean on perfect conditions?
No. When it's raining outside, going 75.
Oh, sure.
Is
Certainly.
that kind of like the biggest number one risk?
Well, let me explain real quick so people know, because we talk about this all the time, but new listeners may not know. The tread depth of the tire is there for a reason. It is to channel water so that the outside of each tread, rubber parts, contact the road surface. Water has to go. So if you're going to run over water at 75 miles an hour with a tire, the water has to be channeled through those treads so that you'll have some contact with the road. If you get lower and lower and lower tread depth, then what's going to happen? The water is not, you can't channel as much water through as fast as you could when the tire was new. So it will actually can lift the whole tire right off the road surface. And this is what we call hydroplaning. That means you're not really contacting the road surface anymore. Bingo, you can hydroplane.
Hold that
sure.
thought. 1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and K. Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by K. Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and K. Smith, pastorchuck.org.
The Lord was with him. That description of David may sound like a comforting assurance, but it means a whole lot more. As we continue studying 1 Samuel, we'll learn how God is sovereign over everything, even using his enemies to accomplish his purposes. Listen this week to Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
Weekdays at 5:30 a.m. here on 91.3 KDKR.
If life is hard and you need encouragement, why don't you come along for our journey through 2 Corinthians on Through the Bible with Dr. J. Vernon McGee. Together, we'll see that God loves to comfort his children in their dark times, and we'll be reminded that God loves us and wants the best for us. I'll save a seat on the Bible bus just for you.
Listen daily, 6:30 p.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to this special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Tony Joe's here, as he is every Friday, to take your Car Corner questions. If you got a question, give us a call at 1-877-913-5357. 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. If you got a question for me, you can go send it in, and I will get you an answer back. That's all at the website. Make sure that you are a subscriber to the email letter list. That's easy to do. Just go to the website, and it'll be right there for you. That's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. So, Tony Joe, I know those cutoffs come up fast and out of nowhere. into the brake. But it was a perfect cutoff right there, because the next question that I have for you, talking about hydroplaning, is what in the world do you do in the event that you start going into that situation?
Well, okay, so here's the thing about I want to just back up 1 minute and inform people of something that's kind of interesting when we're talking about hydroplaning, and then I'll get to that question. You know, when you buy new tires, if you buy 2 new tires, you'll notice, or you might question it, but the tire store will put them on the rear of the car. The back end of the car is where the 2 new tires go. Why is that? Well, because they have decided, the Department of Transportation has decided that with the advent of new technology in automobiles, power steering, front-end design, that hydroplating on the highway is more dangerous than, that is the number one thing that, when it comes to tires, that would be more dangerous than anything else. So that's why they made this rule about putting tires on the rear of the vehicle. Hydroplaning occurs when the back end washes out, as in, let's say you're on ice, and most of us have experienced what happens when you're on ice and you spin the wheels and the car goes sideways, back when we had rear-wheel drive cars. So when that occurs, especially at highway speeds, you know, it's pretty dangerous. So what do you do? Well, of course, if your back end of the car is hydroplaning and veering off to the right as you're sitting in the driver's seat, you want to turn to the right. However, I will say this, Bob. That's old school. That's driving skills. Many people do not have the reaction time or the training even, because all the new things on the car that will help you straighten out the car anyway, such as vehicle speed control. There's a number of different names for what happens when you go into a slide, especially like a hydroplane. The anti-lock brake system will activate certain brakes for you on the car that will pull you back into a straight position, or at least attempt to. It depends on how bad you're hydroplaning. But one of the things I like about the new design and the new technology of vehicles is the fact that they have stability control on a lot of cars now. So people may not realize it or even not know they have this advantage, but in most vehicles now, you do have traction control, vehicle stability control, different names for the same thing. It actually helps you drive the car. And that's one of the big things that eliminates a lot of accidents. Hydroplaning can be very dangerous, but with this new technology, we're kind of keeping it to a minimum, so to speak.
Right.
When the car gets just a little bit out, that's when it takes over. It doesn't have to go into a full-blown slide.
You know, all these situations that you could find yourself in are pretty stressful. I think one of the excuse me, one of the more stressful is getting into a really bad hailstorm. You know, you're just stuck there. Maybe you're stuck in traffic. Nobody's moving. You know, and you're just like, well, my car's just going to have to take it, and hopefully it's not busting the windshields in. What do you do?
Well, I will give you some tips. Now, they're not always, these are just tips that I've come up with myself over the years that I've lived on this planet, and I've been in hailstorms. So it's not something you're going to read in a book or anything. I'm just going to give you my personal thoughts. Number one, I have been in that situation where you're on the highway. I was in the middle lane. I wasn't on the highway. I was on a major thoroughfare. In the middle lane, traffic was backed up because people had stopped under the bridge. Now, Bob, stopping under an overpass is never a good thing to do. People do it because they want to get out of the hail. In fact, when you have hail, you usually have severe weather, high winds, and so forth. When you get under an overpass, those winds, think of a funnel, those winds go into the neck of a funnel and narrow down into a higher velocity wind speed than if you are not under the underpass. So that's not a good practice to do that. So here we were sitting there, and hail came, and there was nothing I could do. Absolutely, I had no moves, and boom, my windshield was cracked, and I didn't have any options. However, if you're not in that exact position, seek a couple of things. A tree. If you can go into a parking lot, and there's a tree provided with leaves on it, that provides you pretty good protection. And you might think about that if there's any apartment complexes that you're passing by and you see a lot of vacancies under the protected areas, the
Right.
places where you can get under the roof. You can do that because usually the hailstorm will pass within 5 or 10 minutes. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about that I think about a lot, and I've used this technique, and that is if you can get near a building here in the city, especially a taller 2-story or above, you want to park on the east side of the building, right up close in a parking spot, right up as close as you can to the building. Because the winds usually bring the storms from the west. So as the storm itself is moving easterly, the wind kind of would hit the top of that building. I'm sorry, the hail would hit the top of that building, kind of blows off the building. Well, if you're up close to the building in a nice little parking spot that's almost up against the building, you're in that little void area where the hail will kind of go over the building, and by the time it comes down on the other side, it will be somewhere in the parking lot, but not close enough for a car to be damaged. And I've actually done that myself and got away with it, fortunately, but it's a close call, but it works, okay? So seek the east side of a tall building and park there until the storm blows over. That works as well.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe worst case scenario. And it's funny, I was thinking in the past where you've given advice what to do if you're in a tornado, and there are things that are kind of counterintuitive. You would think, well, you wouldn't want to do that. But talk about what you do. You're driving in your car and hear the sirens, whatever the scenario is.
Okay, well, if you actually see a tornado coming at you, the last place you want to be is in your vehicle. It is not advisable. I know it seems counterintuitive, but you want to get out of your car. Hopefully you can get into shelter. If you can't get to shelter, you get into a low-lying area on grass or ditch or lawn or the lowest place you can get to, and you lay down flat and you put your hands over your head because you want to protect your head from flying debris. But I will say this, Bob. There was an incident several years ago, and I know this is also counterintuitive, but there was a backup of traffic on George Bush as you got onto, I believe, let's see, where was it, I-30. And 8 or 9 people were blown off the overpass onto the ground, and they died. They perished. Now, think about this. What could they have done? Because my kids, like yours, asked me, Dad, what would you do in that situation? You know what? I had no answer. When you're up there and you're blocked in and there's nowhere to go and traffic is at a dead stop and a tornado is coming across the overpass, my point is this. Listen to the weather. Pay attention on severe weather days. Don't plan a trip to the mall where you got to go over one of the overpasses on a severe weather afternoon when there's a tornado warning out or a watch, and you know that it could be dangerous situations in the next couple of hours. Just try to stay tuned to the weather on these days that we have severe weather. It is to your best interest to stay put or to go someplace intelligent place, like you're going to be, I don't know, you're going to be here at this location and you time your activities to stay through the storm, period, or make it as close as possible, because, you know, you just don't want to be out on the road. You especially don't want to be on a high overpass. That's, as we witnessed a couple of years ago, that's such a dead-end road. There's nothing you can do there. And I wouldn't suggest you get out of the car at that point. I just don't have any answers. My best opinion and advice would be to pay attention to the weather and never get into that situation.
Yeah, I think as good as they are about forecasting, in the worst case scenario, worst case scenario is that they're wrong. But just have a heads up, like the weather that's coming this way tonight, whether or not it turns into anything, being aware of it, and just making sure you're not putting yourself in harm's way.
That's right.
Hey, this is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me? Please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.